All stress, all pressure.
What's going on, everybody? And welcome back to episode 170 of the Designated Players Podcast. MLS history is back. Two more very cool stories today, including the last ever golden goal scored in MLS history in the U.S. Open Cup final by the KC Wiz. That's followed by a breakdown of the 2004 playoffs and more specifically the 2004 Eastern Conference Finals. My name is Andrew. I'm joined by my good buddy Connor, and we're going to talk about all of that and more on this week's episode of MLS History Retold. And now Connor puts in the cool music, and we're over here, and I go, Connor, how are you?
I'm good, and I am impressed that you actually remembered what episode number we were on ahead of time.
I
You didn't have to.
definitely made it a point to look up
Uh
and put
huh.
it in there
Uh
because we're
huh.
about to do a whole bunch of episodes in one go, and it's going to be very easy to get out of place. So prepare, professional podcast like we are.
Something like that.
Man, I got a new haircut. It's a little bit too short for my liking, but it'll grow back.
It's just as ugly as it always is.
Says you, Mr. Hair Off Point. We
It's
need to tell
never
that
off
story.
point.
We need to tell that story one day. That should be the DP pod history, how it began. It
Is
all
there a
started
story behind that?
it
It's
all
it's just
started
you.
it all started in middle school, taking whatever class we took and then calling Connor's hair ugly.
Wow, you don't even remember the class. You don't remember physics and Bobby V.
I remember a lot of that was all high school. I thought there might have been some middle school in there, but that's for another episode at another time. So instead of doing that, why don't we go and look at whatever's around your neck? What do you got?
So I don't. I know we're talking about 2004 Eastern Conference Finals. I don't own a DC scarf right now, but
Good.
I've gone with the Columbus scarf. And when you list it in, you'll find out why.
Nice.
But I'm going to leave it as a mystery for now.
I also don't have a scarf about the team that we're speaking about, which is the KC Wiz. So I'm stretching this one a little bit, and I don't care what you have to say because I'm going to do it anyway. But I've got the OKC energy. Okay, so if you cover the O, it's
You're
just
the
KC.
worst.
It's just
You're
KC.
awful.
So it's just KC, and we're talking about the KC Wiz, and wizards use energy to make magic. KC Wiz, OKC energy, they're basically the same thing.
I'm about to click the leave button. I'm about to leave this call right now. That was
You
horrible.
listen, I could put in yet another episode of the Chicago Fire scarf and be Connor Wright 1.0, where I use the same scarf for 90 episodes in a row, but I'm trying to be clever. Okay. So I'm going to be clever about it.
It's good if you are clever, but this is just sad. That's
You're
not
telling me
clever.
that wasn't clever? I disagree.
No, it was not clever.
Stop it. Stop it.
It would have been more clever if you were like, oh, the OKC stands for original KC because now they're sporting KC, but this is the KC Wizards.
You know what? That's pretty good. I'm
Yeah,
not that
but
I'm
you
not
didn't.
that
But
clever.
you didn't do that.
But
You
you
just
can't you
cover the
can't tell
O, and
me
now we're KC.
you can't tell me I'm not clever. You just have to say I'm not as clever as I could be because this is clever. That's just more clever.
Yeah, you're not as clever as me.
Yeah, I don't spend all my time trying to be clever about accounting books and make people money they shouldn't have. Sending the FBI to your room right now.
Go ahead. You don't know where I live.
I do. You gave us it once. I'm sure somebody has it saved.
It's probably in there somewhere.
All right. Before we we go way deep down on this, we need to go all the way back. And I'm talking back to 2004. September 21st, 2004 to be exact. On this date, the biggest match in world football is being prepared to be played. No, not the World Cup final. No, not UEFA Champions League final. No, not, I don't know, insert any other final here. It's the US Open Cup final. Sporting KC are the home team after running through Atlanta Silverbacks 4-1, easing by the Dallas Burn 4-0, and knocking off the San Jose Earthquakes 1-0. They would take on early MLS dynasty, the Chicago Fire, who had a much tougher go of it getting to the finals, needing a 2-1 extra time win to beat Columbus a 1-0 win to knock off Richmond Kickers, and yet another 1-0 extra time win to beat the Charleston Battery. They were a team that needed 2 extra time games to get past one MLS team. If that's not the most Chicago Fire thing I've ever heard. To this point, the KC Wiz had the MLS Cup and Supporters Shield double in 2000, but had yet to get a hold of the US Open Cup, never making it past the semifinals, which they had gotten to in 2002 just once before. Chicago, as we know, had a much better history of success since joining the league 2 years later, winning the US Open Cup 3 times to this point in 1998, 2000, and the year before in 2003. They also had the Supporters Shield from the year before and an MLS Cup from 1998, as well as finishing runners-up in 2000 to none other than the KC Wiz. So as you can tell, this game was about a trophy, but it was also about a heck of a lot more than that. There were bragging rights on the line, and this game did not actually live up to that hype. 2 sides boasted familiar faces. The Wiz's talented side included the likes of 2000 MVP Tony Meola, which we all know was the greatest MVP year of all time, Jimmy Conrad, Jack Jewsbury, Davey Arnaud, Diego Gutierrez, and Josh Wolf. Meanwhile, Chicago had a lineup full of familiarity of their own, including CJ Brown, Jim Curtin, Logan Paws, Jesse Marsh, and Chris Armas. The story, however, that we are about to tell is not about the familiar faces, the big stars, or even the starting 11, but it's about a sub that was made by Bob Gansler to start the second half that changed everything. The name of that substitute was Igor Simuntenkov, the Russian international who had an 11-year career in Russia, Italy, and Spain before moving stateside. A right-footed striker that had 20 caps for Russia at this time, scoring 9 goals, and also getting all right in America, finishing his career as the Wizards' highest ever U.S. Open Cup goal scorer. His final goal in this game, setting the pace at 5 goals in just 5 games over 3 years. Notching once in 2000, twice in 2003, and twice in his final year with a spot kick from San Jose to put them through to this final game, and the goal that most people likely remember him for in KC soccer history. Now, the biggest story heading into this game was not about Igor, but it was about whether or not the owner of the greatest MVP season of all time, Tony Meola, was fit to play after injuring his Achilles during warmups in the semifinal game versus San Jose. He didn't play in that game against San Jose, missed the match, and missed every game leading up to the final. Weeks of resting, weeks of preparation. And after all of that, he did, in fact, make the starting 11. While it was clear he was not very mobile, he was good enough to go. A relatively good-sized crowd for a U.S. Open Cup game in Kansas City. A crowd of 8,819 came to watch their team play in the final match of a tournament to crown the best club in the United States, even if the pitch was not prepared for such a match. Midfielder Kari Zavanen was quoted as thinking, "It was a tough game, and the fields were not in the best condition." This was not a shock to many, as the Wizards were still playing as tenants in Arrowhead Stadium, the home of the Kansas City Chiefs. As the game took place smack in the middle of the NFL season, you can expect that it was pretty beat up for a soccer game, and it was. After all the preparations, the whistle blew, kicking off a cagey affair for a final match. Outside of a yellow card in the 21st minute and a Logan Paws 43rd minute effort that trickled past the post, the game was relatively quiet. Then, at the start of the second half, Francisco Gomez was removed for Igor Simuntenkov, getting an extra attacking player in the mix. The rest of the second half was equally as back and forth, with KC in the lead in the first half, with Davey Arnaud and Kari Zavanen both seeing their chances fail to produce goals, as well as some other chances from the Chicago Fire later in the match that did not turn into a goal. That meant after 90 minutes, the game was headed to sudden death extra time at 0-0. From this point, it only took 5 minutes past the full 90 for Igor to write his name into the history books. He stepped up to a free kick after Josh Wolf was fouled by Evan Whitfield 19 yards from goal. Igor sent his shot towards goal, to which goalkeeper Henry Ring was able to get a hand to it, but it wasn't strong enough. The ball hit the underside of the crossbar and went over the line, sending the 8,819 supporters in the stands into a frenzy, as Igor had just scored a golden goal to win the U.S. Open Cup. At this time, nobody knew that this would be the last ever, but it was still meaningful none the same. However, it is a bit of a shame on Chicago, who only forced an injured Tony Meola to make one single save throughout the entire 95 minutes. While Tony Meola was only forced to make this one save, he admitted that after the game, he was very, very uncomfortable and in a lot of pain. The decision to play him in this game would prove to be costly. The Wiz would go on and try to complete their second double in 4 years to win the MLS Cup. Though, without the assistance of former MVP Tony Meola, because as they would provide some very crazy games, as Connor may go into later, including a 3-0 second leg win versus San Jose in the quarterfinals, he would not be a part of it. His injury meant that he had to miss the entirety of the 2004 MLS Cup playoffs, which would see the Wizards lose to eventual champions DC United. Spoiler alert. While Igor may not be a household name to everybody, those fond of KC Wizards history will remember him as the player to bring home their first ever U.S. Open Cup. And those fond of MLS history will remember that he is the single only final person to score the final ever golden goal in MLS history. Cry about it.
You're stealing way too much of my story.
Cry about it.
I will cry about it. That's not fair.
All right, in complete honesty, I wrote the intro after I wrote the story. So I wrote the whole story, went back to the intro, and was like, uh-oh.
Nah, that's fine.
I've got some other parts of the story in there.
I've got plenty of other stuff to talk about in here.
I hope so. Is it all about Metro Star Glory?
Oh, there is some great Metro Star glory in there. Don't worry about that.
Hook it to my veins.
How many, just out of curiosity, I don't know if you had seen this in your research, but I think you had mentioned that Igor had the most goals for KC in the US Open Cup. Do you know how many he had?
He had 5 and 5. However, it was broken in 2017 by Dom Dwyer, who had 7.
Oh, so this is just in one US Open Cup run.
No, it was over 3 years. So the KC Wiz played 5 games in 3 years. He scored once in 2002, twice in 2003, twice in 2004. But he did it over 5 games.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were talking about just like one US Open Cup run or if you were just talking about across history.
No, I did mention that it was over 3 years, but I know you don't listen to me ever, so.
I have a lot of podcast work to do, so I was catching up on podcast work.
Yeah, look at that. Not prepared, so unprofessional.
Had to do predictions, that's important.
Yeah, I'll tweet those out right now for you.
Yeah. One other thing that I definitely would have predicted in 2004 is that DC United would have a wild playoff game. So, as always, I have a couple of sources for this one talking about 2004 Eastern Conference Final. I will be covering probably a lot more than just the Eastern Conference Final here, but got a lot of my stuff from Wikipedia, Transfer Market, and there was a video that was actually really helpful in terms of the game in question that we're talking about today from MLS called "If We Had VAR, It Would Have Been 8v8: DC United versus New England Revolution Playoff Moments." Fantastic video. Highly recommend you check it out. I honestly can't remember if I talked a bit more about the video later on. I think I did, but it was really cool. They got a bunch of the players that were in there to kind of give some quotes and thoughts on the game while showing some clips from it too. So highly recommend checking it out. So this story is meant to be focused on 2004 Eastern Conference Finals, and we will get to that. But before we do that, we really need to cover this regular season finish because, quite frankly, I'm not sure there has been a closer battle for the Shield in MLS history. So let's start 5 match days before the end of the season. So match day 26. It's as tight a race for the Shield as I've quite frankly ever seen. The top 2 are the Wiz and the Crew, who will be the top 2 fighting for the title. However, 10th place, which is last in 2004 MLS, is only 14 points away from first. To put this into perspective, the point gap between first and 10th the season prior was 30 points. There are 8 teams currently with 3 games. Sorry, there are 8 teams within 3 games of the Shield at this point in the season, with 5 games left. However, by match day 29, there will only be 2 teams still eligible for the title. The Crew were on 48 points with an 8-goal difference, while the Wiz were on 46 points with a 7-goal difference. The Crew were in the driver's seat, but one slip up and the Wiz could easily swoop in and steal the title. The final match day saw the Crew at the Rapids and the Wiz at home against the Galaxy. A Josh Wolf 23rd minute goal saw the Wiz win their match, meaning that the Crew had to at least get a result in order to have a chance. Unfortunately for the Crew, they got a 1-1 draw, meaning that the final standings saw Wiz 49 points and 8-goal difference, with the Crew on 49 points and an 8-goal difference. We are completely deadlocked. So you would think that goal difference is the second criteria to decide the champion after points, obviously. But this is MLS after all, so of course it's not. Head-to-head matchup is the next decider. So the question is, what were the results between the 2 teams? Match day 3 saw a 1-0 Wiz win at home. Match day 11 saw a 2-2 draw in Columbus. And match day 22 saw a 2-1 win for the Crew at home, meaning that we are again deadlocked. As mentioned, goal difference is the next criteria, which, as mentioned before, is also tied, meaning we're on to criteria number 4, number of goals scored. This would be the deciding criteria, but even this was really close. It finished with the Crew on 40 goals, while the Wiz only had 38, meaning that the Crew won the Shield by scoring 2 more goals than the Wiz that season. Simply incredible, simply MLS. So now we can, and also, if you were listening before, that's where the Crew scarf comes from, creating the Shield there. So now let's actually get into the real story that we're here for today. The playoffs were set with the following matchups in round 1. Columbus versus New England, DC versus the Metro, KC versus San Jose, and Galaxy versus Colorado. New England held on to their first leg victory to upset the Supporter Shield champions, Columbus. DC handled the Metro with ease. The Galaxy overturned first leg loss to move on 2-1 on aggregate. Now I skipped the KC San Jose series because we need a deeper dive. I know we're not supposed to talk about this one either, but it was too good to pass up. So leg 1 saw the Quakes easily take care of business at home 2-0, with Darrow and Weibel scoring the goals. Leg 2 saw one of the most wild playoff games yet. KC managed to pull level by the 48th minute through a Stevenson goal and a Ching own goal. Then in stoppage time, Jack Jewsbury hits a shot from outside of the box to complete the comeback and send the Wiz to the Western Conference Finals. 92nd minute winner to overturn the first leg deficit is unreal. I believe Andrew touched on this a little bit, but that is the Wiz's 3-0 comeback after going down 2-0 in the first leg. All right, so back on track. There's no more distractions. We're talking about the 2004 Eastern Conference Finals now. So the matchup is between the Revs and DC. As a reminder, games are one leg from this point on in the playoffs. So this was winner takes all. And if everything was tied after extra time, that meant penalties. Maybe that's foreshadowing. A star-studded affair was set. Twellman, Shawry Joseph, and a young Clint Dempsey were up against the vets of Ben Olsen, Mike Petke, and Jaime Moreno. There's a great video that I mentioned earlier that had the players discussing the game. Some clips as well. Definitely check it out. One clip that the players said set the tone of the game right away was Shawry Joseph going studs up to Jaime Moreno's groin area 2 minutes into the game. That earned him a yellow card, by the way. And not long after that, Josh Gross got some revenge with a late kick into Shawlery's ankle, which somehow didn't get a card. But you get the idea. These teams were here for blood. The players talked about how there could have been 3 red cards just in the beginning stages of the game. I mean, Pat Noonan said it best. It's the title of the video. If we had VAR, it would have been 8v8. In the 11th minute, amongst all the chaos and reckless challenges, Aleko Eskandarian finds a loose ball, dribbles to right outside of the box, and rifles one to the left of Matt Reese to give DC the early advantage. In no time, Twellman finds the end of a cross and volleys it past MLS legend Nick Rimando to put everything back level. Oh, you thought the chaos was done for a bit? Absolutely not. 21st minute, just 4 minutes after Twellman's equalizer, Jaime Moreno curls one in from the left side of the box, catching Matt Reese off guard and putting DC back in front. Matt takes credit for that goal getting by, saying that considering where Jaime was on the field, he was playing the cross, but Jaime hit a perfect shot that curled just inside the left post. Definitely go check out that video. It was a pretty wild goal. So finally, we get a bit of a break, but there's still more before halftime. In the 44th minute, the Revs whip in a cross, which hits the hand of Brian Carroll just inside the box, giving the Revs a pen and a chance to level right before the half. Steve Ralston stepped up, but was up against one of the greats just starting their career. Rimando dove to his left, the same direction as the shot by Ralston. The ball misses Rimando's outstretched hand, but hits the post. Deflection bounces right back towards the field, but the diving Rimando is in the way, and it hits off of the back of Rimando and rolls in. Extremely unlucky for him. Literally, if he guessed the wrong way, it probably would have stayed out. This whole stream of events had to have been extremely deflating for DC, especially as it came right before halftime. But the second half begins, and if it's anything like the first half, we're in for a treat. In the 67th minute, DC would get their lead back after Christian Gomez headed home the cross from Ernie Stewart. 2 minutes after the goal, Gomez would make way right after that for one of the biggest names in MLS history, a 15-year-old Freddie Adu. DC would manage to hold the lead going into the oh my god. Going well late into the game. However, New England would not go out easily. A corner in the 85th. Ralston delivers a deep ball to the back post, which saw 2 Revs players completely unmarked, one of which was Pat Noonan, who beat Rimando to the ball to head it home and tie the game right before stoppage time. Full time ends 3-3, but we're not done yet. Extra time provided no goals, which meant we were off to penalties. 2 greats of the game in net, so this was not going to be easy for either team. The first pen was from everyone's favorite, Ben Olsen. However, it turns out that he is also a favorite of Matt Reese, as he read him very well and saved Olsen's PK headed down the middle. First for New England was Ralston, who just barely scored the PK earlier in the game. His shot hits the frame again, this time the crossbar, but luckily for Nick, does not fall on the goal this time, meaning both first takes were misses. The next 5 takers were all makes, which included a PK from Reese himself and a PK from 15-year-old Freddie Adu. Talk about nerves of steel, being 15 and taking a playoff game penalty. I'm sure you know why I specified the next 5 scoring. Because with New England's 4th kick, Jay Heaps saw his shot get saved fantastically by Nick Rimando. Match point to DC. Score the pen and it's off to the MLS Cup final. Nobody better to take the pen as well as Jaime Moreno stepped up to the spot. A pretty poor penalty saw Reese guess the right way and save the shot, meaning if New England scored, we were off to PK overtime. And score they did through Shawlery Joseph. Brian Carroll stepped up and hit a beautiful pen into the left side of the netting to give DC the advantage. Up for New England was the young Clint Dempsey. Dempsey hits a very savable pen to the right side, and Rimando guesses right to save it and send DC to the final. RFK Stadium erupted. The stands were shaking. This game was insanely wild, but job's not done. There's still one more game to go, and they were up against Supporter Shield runners-up KC Wiz, who beat the Galaxy 2-0 in the Western Conference Finals. The final was another great game, which started early in the 6th minute with a goal from Jose Burciaga from way downtown. This had to be 20 plus yards out at least, and he rifled it into the bottom right corner, beating Ramondo. Eskandarian would not let it stay that way for too long, as he turned a defender and laced one in to level the score. And not long after that, Eskandarian says, "How about another?" as he doubles his goal tally and doubles the lead just 4 minutes after his first. The goal came after a long throw in, put a KC defender under pressure, who then booted the ball off Eskandarian, allowing him to pick it up and go one-on-one with Bo Oshanii. In fairness, on the replay, and the announcers said the same thing as well, the ball does appear to come off Eskandarian's hand, which was raised seemingly to protect himself from the kick. This means that the goal should not have counted, and we'll have to wait and see if that plays an impact by the end of the game. But wouldn't you know it, just 3 minutes after that, DC found their third goal. Ernie Stewart dribbled into the box, squares the ball looking to find Eskandarian for his hat trick. However, Alex Zotinka, a KC defender, says, "I'm having none of that," and gets one for himself, just in the wrong net. The score would remain going into halftime, meaning DC was in a really good spot to see this out and become champions. Dima Kovalenko, however, is a phenomenal sport and wanted to make this a more even game. And in the 57th minute, he channeled his inner Nick Ramondo, handballing Conradinho's shot off the line. Josh Wolf would then take care of the subsequent penalty, meaning KC was only down 1 now and up a man. KC would have more chances throughout the match, including a great chance missed by Davy Arnaud. However, DC would bunker down and see it out to win their 4th MLS Cup. Now, you can go back to the Eskandarian second goal and question how important that no call was, considering that they would be level if disallowed. I'm sure if you ask KC fans about this game and the ref, they'd likely get furious. However, in the end, and in the history books, it's DC's name that is written next to the title of MLS Cup champions.
My friend, first off, my favorite part about doing these is going deeper, because you're sitting there and you're like, what are we going to talk about in this Eastern Conference Finals? You're like, oh, I need to talk about all of it because it all is so sick, right? That's what this is all about. Secondly, that end of the year, like down to the 5th goal, 5th tiebreaker, is one of my favorite stories that you've told, because it's exact. I had to have a conversation with somebody yesterday, or not yesterday, a couple weeks ago, who told me MLS doesn't have storylines because there's no promotion relegation. And I just laughed at him and I didn't even bother dealing with it. But like, that's exactly what I'm talking about, where it's like people will miss out on so many crazy endings and stories like that simply because they think that they're better than the league, which is, we won't go down that route. But finally, you're missing a key part of our friend Aleko Eskandarian's handball.
Which part would that be?
The Jimmy Conrad part. Unless I missed it.
Was Jimmy the one that kicked it? Or are you talking about the red card?
No. So let me go ahead and pull up this last little bit, and I'll share it with you, because I think with what you covered, doing another episode on it wouldn't make any sense because it would be so short. However, we talked, you already covered, right? Let me pull up my notes here. Yeah. So you covered all the way, firing top corner, controversy strikes, right? 4 minutes later, Conrad attempts to clear the ball from the back line, and Eskandarian jumps and blocks the ball with his hand, right? Everybody stops, they go on, he scores. Flash forward 7 years from that day. Our favorite manager Eno, is on Twitter taking part in what they called, if I remember correctly, let me get the proper phrasing of it, the Jimmy Conrad roast on Twitter. Great comments were coming in. Everybody's making fun of Jimmy Conrad. And then a familiar name pops into the chat. with a very important message. Ever since the 2004 MLS Cup, I've been waiting for Jimmy to retire to get this off my chest. It was a handball, Jimmy. It was Aleko Eskandarian owning up to the goal that should not have been, but he still kept the cup. That's all it was. That's where the story originally had come from, because the handball is the handball. But 7 years later, he comes down the line and is like, hey, just want to let you know, you were right. And Jimmy had a good laugh about it. They had a good little chuckle, but that was the whole point of that whole story there, which is fantastic. It's such a good one. More often. So I got it from a DC United Bleacher Report, article, right? And they go, more often than not, important calls have gone against United ever since. Is it karma? Perhaps. And to that I go, you guys got your karma back in the 2012 Eastern Conference semifinals, so stop crying. Anyways.
Wow, a little salt in that one, huh?
We'll get to that. You better get popcorn. You better get a nice comfortable chair, because when we get to that story, it's gonna be bad.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you everybody for listening and taking part in what we do. We hope you enjoyed it and hope you enjoyed that little piece of MLS history. Make sure you follow us wherever you get your podcasts. You know when the next one goes live, which is going to be the time that Chivas USA utilized FIFA to scout their players and the impact that had possibly on their survival rate, maybe. And then the first ever RSL match where they scored the game winner off a header. And I'm going to leave that open intentionally because I want people to comment and see if they can guess who that is, if they remember, test their ball knowledge a little bit. Ooh. Yeah, look at that. Drive that fan engagement, baby. We hope everybody enjoyed. Make sure you're following us wherever you get your social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and now Threads.
Oh, you made a Threads? I didn't even know about this.
I started it like randomly when I was back home on Long Island, and I have not opened it since. So we're really not on Threads. I posted like 4 times. I'm like, no thanks. Yeah, make sure you're following us. Make sure you're interacting with us. We love the interaction. We love talking to you guys. We love sharing our thoughts and your thoughts and all of that good stuff. And until then, we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players Podcast. See ya.